through. Some of you might have already seen it. So I'm just going to open that up so everybody can take a look at what is going on with Cineware for those of you who haven't heard about it. And so it might be a little bit choppy, but I'm gonna do my best to talk you guys through it as we play it here. So a big thank you to Paul Babb and Rick Barrett out here in the U.S. I know they've been working on the integration with After Effects a long time, as well as the development team out in Germany, Kat, and the whole team that really made this possible. So some of the things that you're seeing here is 3D objects within the composition. That all happens within the Cineware layer. And all the magic happens within this new layer in After Effects called Cineware, which allows you to bring in Cinema 4D files natively, open them up, and treat it like any other layer. The magic really happens because there's a lot of different modes that you can choose from. You can see as far as wireframe, you can see final render. You have access to your multi-pass rendering without actually having to render out everything. And you're able to work with multiple scene files by using multiple layers, just like you're working with footage in After Effects. So it's a really new workflow. It's something that I myself am still getting accustomed to because it is so new. But seeing the amazing things that you can do and the turnaround time of getting your ideas out, it's just a fraction of what it used to be, just trying to get something into your composition and get going. So to get started here, I'm going to jump into a scene that I put together, and bear with me if you guys have seen my presentation. Any of you who've joined us over at NAB, this is going to be a little bit of review of that, but I also have some new scenes. So one of the things that you'll see here is a scene, and I'll jump into how I created this. So it's just a track scene. I was just given some footage, and just in a short period of time was able to come up with a little animation here. And all this was using the tools in Cinema 4D Lite, or C4D Lite, and that is the light version of After Effects, or light version of Cinema 4D that's included in After Effects in the Creative Cloud. So you can see here that I have this tracked footage, and then what I added here was this satellite dish. And these guys were lost. I was trying to give them some reception or whatever the case might be. I was just trying to find something to do with the scene, and was able to do that pretty easily using the tools, and I found the workflow very exciting. So jumping in, let me just go ahead and exit that, and I'm just going to jump into After Effects so you can actually see the project. So how this all starts off is it starts off with the tracking data. So if you're going to be bringing in any type of footage, you just bring it into After Effects and you track it. For those of you who have not used the camera tracker yet, very easily all you have to do is actually click on your footage, go to Animation, and Track Camera. So the camera tracker was available in the last version of After Effects, but there has been a major update to the camera tracker and what you can do with it. And one of the big things is, with the camera tracker, you can now actually set a ground plane. So what I'll do here is, you can see if I click on my source footage and go to my effects and select my camera tracker, after you run your track, you get all these different tracking points. So you're able to actually scale up the tracking points so you can see them a little bit clearer. You can actually right-click on any of these, and you can create a solid or a null. One of the big things is now you can see right here, you can right-click and you can set the ground plane at origin, and that's what I did for this scene. And what this will allow you to do is it gives you now your coordinates all based on that ground plane. So if you've used a camera tracker before, you might have come into a scene and your scene is tracked well, but your ground plane is completely off. So trying to add things into the scene, everything's going to the 0, 0 point, and then you're trying to move things around. So for right here, I just set ground plane at origin, also created nulls and a camera, or created solid and a camera. So you'll see that I have this solid, and then I have this camera, and this is in my After Effects composition. Now normally, if you're trying to bring this into After Effects, or you're trying to bring this into Cinema, you'd be able to just go to File, export, and go to Cinema 4D Exporter. Now when you go to Cinema 4D Exporter and you export this file, it's going to bring over and actually create a Cinema 4D file based on your composition settings. So you don't have to go back in and change the project settings for your timeline or anything else. That's already created. It also brings over your track solid as well as your 3D your 3D camera that was already solved in After Effects. So I've already done that just for the sake of time and created this Cinema 4D file. Now from here I'm just going to hit Control E, and this would launch Cinema 4D Lite. So C4D Lite is included in the next version of After Effects when it's shipping June 17th. So everybody who's never used it, 20% of you who haven't used it out there, are now going to have access and be able to start learning and playing with Cinema 4D Lite and start using a really powerful tool. And for those of you who already own Cinema 4D, you'll be able to capitalize on the Cineware layer and the new workflow. So bringing this scene in, you can see right from here that I already have, and I'll just go ahead and play. It might be a little bit choppy. Bear with me here. You can see that I have this little tracked camera. So one of the things that you can do from here is you can create a background. So I can just easily create a background object, and I could create a new material. And then I can actually add my background to this by just loading my image, and I'll just go back here. Now for those of you who haven't used Cinema 4D at all, and for those of you who have, please bear with me. I want to go over the interface a little bit for the 20% of us who have never used Cinema 4D and are looking at it for the first time. And at the same time, I'm going to go through some of the tools here, but I'm going to also show you how the integration works back and forth in the live 3D pipeline. So right here you see me, I just created a new material. I created a background object. So what I can do now is I can actually just grab my footage here. I can just open that. And now from here I can actually just calculate my animation, and I have my frames of animations calculated. I'll turn off the specular, and I'll just drag and drop this onto my background here. So now you can see the background within my shot. So as I scroll through it, you can see it's all animated out. Now I'll shut this off just for the sake of speed here and start going through the interface. So this is Cinema 4D Lite, and when you register, you'll get a new menu here within the MoGraph menu. You'll get a couple of effectors: the fractor object, as well as the plane and random effector. Very powerful effectors for those of you who've never used it. MoGraph is an extremely powerful tool for any type of motion graphics animation, also used for visual effects, a lot of interface design. It's countless applications using MoGraph. But anytime you're adding things to your scene, you're pretty much going to be using this menu up here. So if you're going to add a cube, you can add a cube just by selecting that. It gives you these little handles. You can actually start scaling up, moving things around. Now from here, you'll see that things are changing over here. As you add things to your scene, they show up here. It's kind of like your layer or your layers in After Effects. This is our object manager here. So if I was to add another object, and for example, I can add a sphere, I can move this over just using the handles here. You'll see that it shows up also in the object manager over here. And once I actually click on that, just like you would an After Effects layer, you can click on that, you're given your attributes. So here I can actually start adjusting my attributes like I would any of the different effects in After Effects. So here I'll just move this around a little bit. Now, another really nice thing about Cinema is the keyframing system. If you're already familiar with the stopwatch, it's very similar. Instead of that little stopwatch, what you have are these little circles here, and what you can do is set keyframes very easily. So I'm here at frame 0. I'm just going to control click, and you'll see that this turns red here, and it's highlighted. It shows that there's a keyframe. Also, down here in my timeline, you'll see this little blue box that shows there's a keyframe. So I'm going to jump to frame 54 and just make this a lot larger so you can actually see it animated here. So I just hit Control and clicked on that again, and now you'll see that I have just a little animation of that ball increasing in size. Now, for those of you in Cinema who are already familiar, I can just hit Control Save, and I can jump back into my file in After Effects. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring in that track footage that I was working on directly on and over my comp, and you'll see that right from there I have the sphere. I also have the animation of it, so as I scroll through this timeline, you can see that it goes from small as I go through, and the sphere actually gets larger and animated. So, I mean, the ideal situation, I'm working from my laptop here, but if you definitely have dual monitors and you're working back and forth, this can really help you through your comp and figuring out the look and feel of your scene as you develop it. So jumping back into Cinema 4D Light, there's a lot of other things that you'll be able to do with Light. I'll go ahead and just delete this for now. I'll add splines, so you'll have, as far as full spline tools, you can also bring in Illustrator 8 files, and what that will give you the ability to do is if you're doing any type of logo work or anything like that, you can do that. Here's a rotation tool, so I can actually rotate here, scale this up. Now, one of the first things you're probably going to want to do is actually, hit load and make it 3D. So if you're bringing in an Illustrator file, you're going to have the spline data here. All you're going to need to do is actually take it into an extrude NURBS, and just like you use the Pickwood tool in After Effects, we use parenting in Cinema. So you would just make the child, you'll make the star a child just by dragging and dropping it. For those of you who haven't seen, you can just drag and drop it under the extrude, and now you have your 3D star. And once again, you can just click on the extrude and then really start playing with the different things like the movement, the Z-space, so you can really put together the look that you're looking for. Now, there's a number of different things in here, from the array object, the bool. There's a number of different deformers, so you can actually start playing around, exploding things. Now, this doesn't have dynamics. For that, you'd want to go into at least Broadcast Edition. So from here, if you're taking a look at some of these deformers, they are pretty powerful for effects, so you can actually jump in and shatter things and break them apart. It's it's a really quite powerful, the amount of tools that you're given. So I'm just going to jump through just to keep the ball rolling here. I'll add a light, and the nice thing is your lights, your cameras, as well as any nulls will come over with their 3D position, as well as the information from Cinema, so you don't have to reduplicate that work. So right here I've added a light, and once again I can just save, jump over into my After Effects scene, and you see as I saved, it's referencing that file, it's rendering out, and now I have this new scene. So just to show you some more changes, one of the things that you can do is actually add a new material, and right from here, let's just make this yellow so you can actually see that. And I'll just drag and drop this onto my star and the cube, which is also its child. Hit save, come back over, and now you'll see those adjustments right there. So I definitely encourage you guys who've never used Cinema to definitely start playing around. You've seen how to add objects, start to manipulate them as well as texture them. Now I'm going to jump out of the camera that was actually created in After Effects so you can actually see the animated camera that was created in After Effects. So all the animation of that camera, it's right down there, all the animation of that camera was brought over from After Effects. So it really saves you a lot of time with creating an animated camera or trying to track that. All that's already brought over. The heavy lifting's already done. So now I'll jump into After Effects and actually jump into the Cineware layer itself, and for that I will actually use some footage that I've already built, and like I said, everything that was built out was actually using the Cineware layer, or using Cinema 4D Light for this scene. So I'll just drag and drop that onto my footage, And as you'll see here that it jumps in, and I can actually jump into my project here, and I'll go into the effects controls, and now you'll see the Cineware layer. So if I wanted to actually edit this project, I can just hit Control-E, and it will pull in the project. I can jump in, I'll delete that just so we can see things clear. And now here I am with my little tracked footage. Now, the first thing that you're going to see within the Cineware layer is the render. So right now it's set to software, which is you know, a fairly fast mode, so you can kind of hop through and you can see how things are animating out. Now, as you get closer and you're looking to change up the quality, you also have standard draft, and then you also have your standard final. So you'll see in my standard final, I get my reflections all in here. So that's, you know, going to be the final that you're actually seeing in there. So from here, jump down, and let me go back to software just for the sake of speed. So one of the things that you're able to do is keep textures in RAM, and that will just keep your textures in RAM, so you don't have to have that calculated and pulling those bitmaps every time it's calculating. So also, one of the things you can do is apply to all. So if I had several instances of this layer, and one of the things that I can do right away is duplicate this. When I apply all to all, it's going to apply these settings to all of these project files that are using the same project. So if I was to actually, in my duplicated layer, I can actually, let's say if I jumped over to, say, box. So right now you can see, if I turn this off, I still have my software shading not box. Now if I hit apply all, you'll see that it goes over to box for everything. So it's a good thing to keep in mind if you have multiple Cineware layers and you want to keep everything you know, looking the same, so you can make sure you're working with it. Or if you're looking for multiple effects, this is another way that you can do that. So I'm just going to take it back off of box to just current shading, and I'm going to delete that layer. So now as you come into the project settings, there's this Cinema 4D camera, and there's a lot of different camera options, and I'll jump into another scene to show you that in a little bit more depth. But I'll also change my shading back to standard final. So now from here, you can actually use the Cinema 4D camera. You can use a selected camera. You can do a center comp camera, and you'll see that that moves because it's, you know, tracked in with the footage. So I can do a centered camera comp, selected Cinema 4D camera. Now, if I had multiple cameras in my scene, so one of the things I could do is actually create another camera. So now I have another camera, another angle. This one isn't animated. I can look through it. And for this, I'll just call this camera 2. So this one isn't animated, it's static. You see the other camera coming by, and you might not even see it. So let's see here. I can just jump into my set camera here. And now it's saying my 3D camera tracker camera. Now if I save it, it's going to update that information. And I can set my camera, and I can go over to camera 2. And you'll see that it jumps into that position, as well as it's static throughout. It doesn't animate. It's actually just a static camera. So I'm going to jump back into my main camera here, my 3D camera track camera. But there you're seeing some of the camera options that actually go along with it. So now a really powerful thing that you're able to do is actually use layers. So if you come over here, you can actually select layers. So for those of you who don't like being organized in Cinema, one of the big things you can look at is the layer system, and it's very powerful. So, you know, for sake of time, I'm not going to dive into the layer system, but it's definitely something to dive into and organize, because now with Cineware, you're able to capitalize on it like never before. So, one of the things you'll see here is I have all these different layers color-coded, and I can actually go to my layer manager. And here you can see that I have my landscape on its own layer. So now what I can do here is I turned on my Cinema 4D layers. So now After Effects is going to be looking at those. So I'm going to duplicate my footage here. And I'll just jump into a further point in the timeline so you can actually see where everything's out. So now I have this right now, it's selecting the layer. So now I can say, okay, what layer do I want to select? Well, I can turn off these other layers. And I can say, okay, I just want my landscapes. And now my landscape layer shows up here. Let's see what I have on here. And just make sure there's color and texture on it. Save that. Excellent. So you see it actually coming on here. I actually have it animated. So you'll see that that landscape's there. Now if I actually turn off this layer, you'll see that that shift happen in the hue where it's behind and there. So now I can actually shut off that layer, so I can set my layers, and I can just go to satellite. So I'll be jumping into another scene to actually show the layer system even more. But one of the nice things is once you get this of range, you're able to dive through, set your layers. So if you're going to have just a shadow catcher, you can do that. If you're just going to have the pole by itself, you can really segment your things out. And instead of having to render each one of them, you're able to actually just select which ones you want on and which ones you want off. So right there, you can see I just had everything set on different layers. So it's really useful to actually use the layer system and use it well. Otherwise, you can run into situations where you're having everything disappear like I just did. So now for your multipass, for those of you who are used to the traditional multipass, that's still available. That hasn't gone away, but one of the things that you can capitalize on is you can do multipass. So you can set your multipass. So right now, right here on this layer, it's my RGBA. So I have everything there, but I can actually jump in, and this is actually accessing my multipass settings. So if I added a depth layer, I added several other layers, those would actually show and I'd be able to choose from them. So here I'm just going to go into the reflection only. So right here you can see, okay, there are just my reflections for that pass. So I've taken this layer and made it just my reflections. Now one of the things that I can do is I'm going to go back, so I'll set my multipass, and I'll just go now to shadows. This will just be my shadow path. You'll just see the shadows that I have here. So if I duplicate this layer, I'll take this and I will shut off my multipass there, and I will set my other layer here to just my reflections. Okay, there. Now I'll change this over to multiply or screen. So now you can see it's a little bit brighter, but now I can actually go into my opacity and change that down. So this one's like, yeah, that's great, but want a little less reflection. Now you can actually go there instead of having to have all of your different passes. You can actually segment it out and build it, layer by layer, and selecting what you want and seeing and actually adjusting that. So the nice thing is, if I wanted, just glows on a reflection, I can add that just to my reflection layer. So I can just go into my glow, add that directly onto that layer, and now I can have my glow settings just affecting my reflection layer or whatever channel. So you can apply effects, and I'm really actually interested to see what comes about with this, because so many people will be able to play with the different layer systems. So right from here now, go ahead and go down here. Another way, if you're used to having every layer that's available to you normally within Cinema 4D and you want to still have that control of all that, instead of actually selecting the individual ones, you can just add image layers. And from here, you'll see that it added my ambient, my specular, my shadow, so all those, as well as actually set up the proper blending modes. So you can see as far as your atmosphere is on multiply, your ambient occlusions on multiply, your diffuse is normal, your specular is on add. So you can see that it takes a lot of the channel setting work out of it. So that's another thing to streamline your process if you're used to working with the same style. Another thing that you're able to do is extract the scene data. So in extracting the Cinema 4D scene data, that would be your external compositing tags, your lights, your camera. So if I actually hit extract, you'll see that it it brings in all the different lights that I had. It also brings in my other cameras. So that's another way, and we'll jump into a scene that uses that a little bit more in detail. But that's the Cineware layer overall, and that's the basic workflow, starting off in After Effects tracking footage, jumping into Cinema 4D, building out things you're going to comp in, jumping back, and then using the Cineware layer to capitalize on that. I think this is a good time to take any questions, and then I can jump into the next project where you start off in Cinema 4D and then work your way back into After Effects.
All right. There are a lot of questions.
Of course.
So just to let you guys know, I'm gonna go through as many of these as I can, but anything that we don't answer here, we can answer via email after this is over. So let's see. By using the new layer function within Cinema 4D Lite, does that make the object buffer tag null and void?
Well, the object buffers will still be there, and you can still use that workflow. In the next scene, we'll go into that a little bit, and you'll be able to name object buffers, but essentially you will be able to use your layer system to isolate objects, so you wouldn't have to use object buffers. So that's a nice workaround for object buffers for sure.
Okay, and Sid is asking, will C4D Lite interact with After Effects motion blur and depth of field?
So yeah, if you're going to be using your After Effects motion blur and depth of field, if you have your depth pass brought over from Cinema, that's usually the if you're looking for speed, definitely you use those layers. You would just extract your scene data, extract your depth pass, motion vector pass, and then you can apply whatever effects to those layers. So that would be definitely the workflow to go with.
Okay. Does C4D Lite have Projection Man?
I do believe so. But for a full list of the features, there's actually a list on our website on maxon.net where you can actually see the comparison between Lite and Broadcast Studio and really dive in. So there's camera projection. As far as Projection Man itself, I do believe so, but that's something definitely to reference. There's so many different features that are and aren't included that I would say we reference that sheet on our on maxon.net for the most.
Yeah, if you guys actually scroll through the chat window, I posted. Someone else asked a question about that, so I posted a link to the PDF directly on there, so you can check out all the differences if you want. Also, let's see. Let's see. Yeah, if you model and animate in like Studio R12 or R13, can you bring those projects into Cinema 4D Lite?
So yeah, I believe after, so Cineware is actually recognizing Cinema 4D files. So if you have those animations, you can bring those in, yes.
Okay. And
I do believe it goes back to 12, but not 11.5, just because of the way everything was adjusted in 12.
Okay. Will After Effects recognize thinking particles or hair as well as properly render them as Cinema 4D would have?
So as far as the render itself, so rendering is still the Cinema 4D render. So the render actually takes place within Cinema 4D. So those would be, it's accessing the Cinema 4D file, rendering it, and bringing over that frame. So yeah, hair, I've tested hair, and particles do show up, yes. Both of them.
Okay. Is there a dope sheet or F-curve editor to make the animation smoother?
So for animations, I take that would be for someone, the folks who haven't used Cinema. So real quick, if I'm doing an animation here, there is your full animation settings. So let me jump over here. We have a whole layout for animation. So inside of Cinema, go here. Set another keyframe. So yeah, inside Cinema, if you're watching, you can go to Window and timeline, and now you have, as far as your full access to your timeline, you can access the curves as well. So you can actually jump in for ease in, ease out, and you'll get your full position curves and all that. So yeah, you can animate using curves. That's not a problem. And then you can customize this layout however you like as well. So if you want to stick your timeline down there, you can do that as well. So yes.
Okay. Are the scenes imported by Cinema 4D into After Effects able to be rendered with stereoscoping from inside AE?
So for stereoscopic, yes, because I mean it is like another piece of footage. I haven't done it, but I've heard other people do it. So yeah, you can. I haven't used the stereoscopic features in it, but yes, you can.
Okay. And do you know if you can open like a Cinema 4D Lite scene with camera maps in R12, for example?
Yeah. So what will happen is, so Cinema 4D Lite is still creating a Cinema 4D file. So you'd be able to open that in, you know, if you have R14, 12, 13, you'll be able to open up that Cinema 4D file as long as it's a compatible C4D file. Now, if you're using features from, let's say, the studio version in Lite, those aren't going to be available, so you're not going to be able to edit, you know, a MoGraph feature that's not available or anything like that. But you can open up files back and forth. Okay.
And just to clarify, I'm correct in saying this, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is only available in the CC release coming on June 17th, correct?
Correct. So it's not a standalone product. It is only available in the Creative Cloud, and the when that's shipping, that will be included with After Effects. So the only way to get it is actually with After Effects. You'll be able to do File, New, and Max on C4D file. That will launch and create a new untitled Cinema 4D Lite file. If you already have a version of Cinema 4D, it will launch your version of Cinema 4D, so you're not going to have the restricted functionality of Lite. But yeah, it's only going to be included inside After Effects.
Okay, so the only way to access Cineware is through After Effects.
Correct. So Cineware itself is part of After Effects, and it's a layer within After Effects. So you can see as I click on my Cinema 4D file here, it's its own layer. So as I bring in files, I could actually bring in different files. So I have right now my project here on one, and this is something else that's good to point out. So I can actually bring in a whole nother project. So you can see that I have two completely different projects in here. One of the strengths of this, as well, is since it's referencing the actual Cinema 4D file, I could have different render settings set for each file. So let's say this was my background object, this stuff in yellow. I can have that set to lower render settings, lower anti-aliasing, so it can be farther off in the background, and it's not as important, so I don't need as much power. And then I can have you know, something in the foreground, you know, with really high render settings, and then, you know, something in the midground with kind of somewhere in the middle, and I can just render that out once inside of After Effects instead of, you know, putting them all in one Cinema 4D scene and rendering them all at high quality. So there's a lot of different flexibility that you get with it.
Okay. Do you know, how does V-Ray, for example, integrate with this whole process? I have a lot of questions about V-Ray materials.
Yeah, so right now plugins aren't supported. So if you're using V-Ray, you'd still want to use the classic workflow.
Okay. Can you use the scene as a light source to make the objects look more real, so you don't have to add an individual light? I'm guessing like an HDRI type of.
Yeah, so you can definitely use HDRI. One of the things that I'm actually using in here to get the reflections. Let me open that again. So one of the things that I'm using to actually get reflections in here, I just turned them off, are some spheres in here to catch the reflection. But yeah, you can set up your lighting as far as, yeah, so right here I have my reflections, so if I turn these off, you'll see that I created these little spheres to actually project reflections onto there. But yeah, you can use HDRIs for lighting, for sure.
Okay. Let's see. Can you use the physical renderer?
Physical render is not supported yet. That is something that I know they're looking at getting up and running, but physical is not supported at this time.
Okay. There's still a lot of questions, but I think.
All right. So then what I'll do is I'll jump into the next scene where I'm starting off in Cinema. So I'll just close this project right now. So I'll jump into that scene, and hopefully it clears up a couple more questions. And let's jump back here. So yeah, so I'll just jump into this scene real quick. So this is a scene that was built out. You have you know, just a basic animation here, and let me reset my window. Customization layouts. Expanding.
Actually, real quick too,
Yeah.
I just want to let everybody know this will be recorded and posted online, so you'll all get an email with a link to that recording. So you know, if you do miss anything or have to take off, you won't miss. You can rewatch it. So there's a lot of questions about that. Just wanted to answer that quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And as well, I mean, you can find me on Vimeo. I'm Major FX, and on Twitter, I'm Major VFX. So you can find me there, and I'm pretty active, definitely on Vimeo. So if there is any questions on art and you know, the techniques here, we're happy to share. And I know the community, there's a lot of support. So you know, anybody at Maxon, feel free to reach out to us online, and because there's a lot. I mean, this is a whole new workflow, so there's a lot of things that need to actually be discussed more, because we're finding out new workflows and new enhancements. So it's pretty exciting. So jumping into this scene real quick, what you'll see is we just have a basic animation, and this was all done using the effectors, just the plain random effector that actually come with C4D Lite once you register. You'll see the full on the better use of the layer system here, so you can actually see the different layers broken out. And you also see some tags here. So like the video wall itself has an external compositing tag. For those of you who haven't used Cinema 4D before, tags are, there's a number of different tags that can do everything from vibrating, so it can avoid scripting, as well as bringing in information using using the information on the tag. So tags are very powerful, something we definitely don't have time for, but something to get very familiar with as you jump into Cinema. So here, if you built this scene starting off in Cinema and now you wanted to jump into After Effects and start your composition from here, what you could do is just go from here, File, and I can import my file, jump back in, Party Tutorial, and Nick, the Grayscale Gorilla, helped us build this out, so got to give him credit. Jump into and create a new comp. So right from here, you saw that I just imported a Cinema 4D file raw. It actually has the file. You'll see the animation here. One of the things as I jump back into Cinema, you'll see that there's multiple cameras. So I have my behind-the-scene cam. I also have my animated cam. So as I jump through here, I can hit play, and you can see that I have my scene animated. So you'll also see that in my render settings, as I jump in here, that I have a mask video wall. This would normally be an object buffer, so this goes back to the object buffer question. All you need to do is just double click in that and name. Now you can actually name your object buffer. So I have the mask for the balloons, mask for text, and I can just name those instead of object buffer 1, 2, and 3. You can actually name those, and After Effects will pick up on those, and we'll jump in there. So you can see I have multiple cameras, so I'm just going to jump in here. I'll keep textures in RAM. I'll keep this in software, but you can see I can jump into standard final. Also, when you're working in Cinema, and you come over here, you're probably going to want to work in a linear workspace, since linear is on by default for Cinema. So you can jump in and work in a linear workspace, and I can actually probably change that to 16 bits. So here we are, and now I'm going to jump back onto my Cineware layer. So here I can jump in and switch cameras. So this is something I didn't have the last scene set up for the cameras, but now I'll jump here and now I can set my camera, and you'll see I have my main camera. Now I'll jump to my animated camera. So now you can see here that it's jumped to a whole other camera within the Cinema 4D scene. So I can actually set camera again, and I can go from my animated camera to my behind the scenes camera, and you know, jump in there. So it's another way, if you wanted to do multiple shots, you can actually do multiple Cineware layers and actually get your multiple views instead of having to render it out multiple times within Cinema. So that's something else there. Now, also, if you jump into your Cinema 4D layer system, now you can actually set layers a little bit better. So now if I wanted to actually just, let's say, isolate the balloons, I could just isolate the balloons, hit OK, and now I just have the balloons because the layer system was actually utilized properly. You've isolated those on its own layer. I can set a layer and say, okay, maybe I want my balloons and text, and I'm going to do a whole different background. So now I have my balloons and text, my animated camera, or right now I'm using my, let me set my camera back to my animated camera, get more motion in there. So now I can go back and now I can start manipulating the environment and things like that. Same thing, I can jump in and let me set my layers now and I can turn on everything. So here I have my scene, and also another thing that's nice is, you know, this is saying demo right now, but I can just jump in and go from my text, which is saying demo, and I can change that to a party. All right, so now I have new animation, and let's just change that to all caps. And I'll just hit save real quick. Turn off my cap. So now you can see that just on the fly I'm able to adjust it and I get all my animation coming in. So now from here, something else that I didn't show. So you've seen the multipass. So if I wanted to, I can actually let me duplicate this layer so I can jump into my multipass now. I can set my multipass and I can jump in and say, let's see. I can just go with my reflections again. So now you can see that I have all my reflections, and I can change that back over to you know, screen if I wanted to, and I can adjust that if I wanted more pop. But what I want to do in this scene is actually, instead of playing with the multipass, I actually want to extract the scene data and put something on that back wall. So here I'm just going to extract, and you'll see that I have the video wall, I have both of my cameras, I have both of my lights. All that data was pulled over into After Effects from Cinema, and the video wall was set up, and the external compositing tag put that together with this information. Now, if I wanted to add a video, what I can do is, let me just import some video footage here. So I'll jump in here, footage, and let's see, max on party at SIGGRAPH, sure. I can just drag this overboard here, jump into my party scene, and now I can go to my position. And actually, let me change this into a 3D layer so we can actually connect it to the video wall. So a 3D layer, and then I'll pick whip it over to my video wall. Now let me just move this in, scale it up. So now I have my video wall, and it's you know, it's attached to that solid. So you can see as it animates, it's moving along. Now, for my object buffer, what I can do is actually duplicate this layer, and I'll just put it above, just like you would in the past. So now what I can do is actually on this layer right here, I can jump into my multipass. So I can set my multipass, and I can go into just that object buffer. And so the object buffer was named a masked video wall. So I'll jump in there and change that so now you can actually see that there's the mask, and you know, it's nice, it's animated, and now all I have to do is actually make this a Luma map. And now you can see that I have my video wall animated in there. and it's attached. So that's a way that you can get your object buffers if you're still using the object buffer workflow in there, and you can have them defined instead of having to render out each one of them. You can kind of use an object buffer, test it, keep going, test it again, grab something else, add an object buffer on the fly, and see what you actually need and don't need. So that's a big thing with extracting scene data and doing the workflow from Cinema into After Effects. You got to see both starting off in After Effects, tracking your camera, setting up your scene in After Effects, coming over to Cinema, building out objects, adding objects, bringing that back over into After Effects, and then also the reverse workflow, starting off in Cinema, having an entire scene built out, then importing that scene raw into After Effects using Cineware, the Cineware layer, as well as adding video and kind of using that same workflow that some of us are accustomed to, or if it's something new, that's showing you as far as the power of the Cineware layer and how you can actually capitalize on the speed and the live 3D pipeline. So that's a general gist of it. I definitely want to get into the questions because I can kind of go through more, but you've seen pretty much the different options in here, and I really want to kind of reach out and make sure all the questions are answered. So let's open it back up to questions.
Okay. Let's see. Couple, well, somebody wants to know what system specs you're using.
Oh, geez, of course. Let's see.
Well, we can get back to that one if you...
Yeah, I'll get back to that in a minute.
Jason's asking if you wanted to isolate each layer in After Effects and duplicate your Maxon layer, can you do that and color correct from within AE without going into Cine? Or with going
So, yeah, so one of the things you could do at any time is you can duplicate. So right now I can just duplicate my layer. So now if you'll see here on the bottom, I just have a duplicated layer. And then from here, I could do a number of things. So I can do effect, and I can do my color correction, jump into curves, and I can start adjusting that. And that's applying to that layer itself. So I could actually adjust this layer and say, okay, let me change that so I can set my layers, and that's just going to be the balloons. So yeah, you can isolate different things, and I can see the wacky color correction actually happening on the balloons. So I can blow them out. You can do a number of different things, but yeah, that layer and the Cineware layer itself is isolated, so anything that you apply to that layer is affecting just that layer.
Okay. Can you set keyframes for the Cineware settings so that you can keyframe your camera edits directly in AE?
No, there's no. As you can see, there's no stopwatches. But what you can do is if you are going to set up multiple cameras. So if you're going to start off in this animated camera, then you just duplicate that layer and then switch to the other camera. So you would just have a sequence of duplicated layers.
Okay. If you have any of the full versions of Cinema 4D, can things like GI still be used when rendering in After Effects, or is it limited to the...
Yeah, GI is, physical is not available, but GI and all the other render settings within Cinema are.
Okay, so you're basically you're limited to whichever version of Cinema 4D you have?
Yeah.
Okay. I think you already answered, can it control the keyframes inside Cinema 4D from After Effects?
Can you control the keyframes of Cinema 4D within After Effects? No. So what's actually happening, I thought they were just asking about F-curves within Cinema. What's actually happening is it's referencing the Cinema 4D file. So the Cinema 4D file, all those keyframes actually take place. Now, if you wanted to animate these lights, since your lights, your cameras, and your nulls as well as solids come over, what you would do then is if you're going to keyframe any of these lights or cameras, then what you would do is after you keyframe them, you would file and export Cinema 4D exporter, and then those keyframes of your lights, of your cameras, and everything else will be animated, but that you're not keying actual Cinema 4D objects back and forth.
Okay. Does After Effects kick off the Cinema 4D render?
So it's accessing it behind the scenes.
Okay.
So as you see, as I jump to a different frame, it's actually connected. It has that live 3D connection to the Cinema 4D file, and then it's using the Cinema renderer to actually render that frame. At least that's how it's been told to me. It could be just magic. As far as I know.
Do you have to bake dynamics before importing to After Effects?
No, you do not. So I don't have dynamic scene in here, but you don't. But I would I would definitely, I would do them, but you don't have to.
Okay. Can you change the opacity of the balloons in the scene to show the screen behind with some realism?
The balloons?
Yeah.
Yeah, so let me see here. Let me jump into... Let's see, so I have that. So I think they already had some transparency on them, but I duplicated it. So what I could actually do in this scene is I can set my layers and actually turn off the balloons on this one. Now you're seeing as far as like a balloon mask, but now I can actually duplicate this and do one with just the balloons. So now I can do set layers, turn on balloons, and turn everything else off. So now I have my balloons, and then I can just hit T and scrub that way down. So you can adjust it since it's on its own layer.
Okay. Matthew's asking, what about caustics?
Caustics, I haven't rendered them, but I have not heard that it was a limitation at all.
Motions are handled
Okay. What about render farm support?
The rendering, since it's licensed through your After Effects licensing on the Creative Cloud, that's going to be handled by the licenses that you have with After Effects. If you do have a render farm, I would definitely recommend contacting our tech support as it gets set up. But on that, it's nothing that I've personally played with or ran into, so I think that's going to be somewhat new as far as workflow. But I have not played with it at all.
Okay, I know I think you probably already answered this, but there's a few questions about motion blur. Where do you set the motion blur in Cinema
Yes.
or AE?
So yeah, in Cinema, what I would look at doing is actually under your render settings, I would just add a motion vector pass. So you can see here, you have your motion vector path. So I would add that into your multi-pass rendering, and then I would bring that into After Effects, duplicate that, and then you can just set your multi-pass, and then you can actually just use your motion vector pass, and then apply the. Let me just save that out here, and then apply your motion blur to that motion vector pass. So I would definitely use it within After Effects. Now you can still motion blur is still applied inside of Cinema, but just from an artistic speed, and I would just go with the classic way of using your motion vector pass, or for depth of field, using your depth pass and then doing it in After Effects.
Okay. Can you blend time or stretch the animation that's been created in Cinema 4D in After Effects?
Yeah. So the scene itself and the layer is an actual Cinema 4, or it's its own layer. So let me actually jump in here. No, a lot of this stuff is playing around, so it's like these are all different things that I haven't had the opportunity to play with as of yet. But it is its own layer, so it's basically looked at as footage. So anything that you'd be able to do to a footage layer, essentially you'd be able to do to a Cineware layer. So if I'm in here and I actually just solo that, just solo this layer real quick. Now if I actually right-click, go to time, and let's go to time stretch, and I go, let's just go 200. So now you'll see that, yes, in fact, it works. So.
Okay. I know there's a lot of questions around rendering, and like one is it better to break up the layers of Cinema 4D into layers in After Effects versus having just a single C4D file? Also, like, what's the best workflow when you have a heavy render, like something that's more than 10 minutes a frame?
Yeah, so I mean, since After Effects is connecting to the Cinema and then rendering within After Effects, there are going to be, it would be slower than most standard renders directly out of Cinema. Especially if you're going to be doing something heavy, what I would look at from a workflow standpoint is probably setting up your composition, seeing how everything looks and how it fits into your scene, and then doing the render out of Cinema and then just bringing it in if you're going to be doing something that intensive. The ways that you can really start capitalizing on Cineware is if you're going to be doing, let's say, if you're going to be using the layer system. So then a lot of people have talked about render layers. So now you can actually have individual items isolated, so you don't have to worry about an object buffer for those. It's on its own layer. It's its own it's one render out, and you can have multiple layers within that. You can duplicate it as many times, as well as using multiple Cinema 4D files. So if you're going to do, like in the example I used, your background, midground, foreground, if you're going to do 3 separate Cinema 4D renders, or you could do 1 After Effects render within your comp, and 3 Cinema 4D projects would all be rendered within it, that might be faster. So it really depends on scene setup, as does all renders, but that's one of the ways that you'd be able to start seeing efficiencies and improvements using Cineware in that workflow versus just rendering directly out into of Cinema. But if you're doing something really render intensive and you already have the look and scene that you're going for, I would probably still use the render directly out of Cinema.
Okay, on the same render issue, are the Cinema 4D render settings utilized through AE?
Yes. So the actual scene settings here, so of this file right here, this Nick Party Light, if I go into my render settings and I actually started adjusting any of these things, that's what is going to be pulled over. So if I adjust my depth channel, as I add things into my multipass, my anti-alias settings, all those settings for this file are actually referenced and rendered based on the Cinema 4D file. It's not based on After Effects settings other than what you have in the Cineware layer. It's actually accessing the file from Cinema. That's why you can actually have the multiple Cinema 4D files in one After Effects composition and have different render settings for them, so you can have different speeds and different qualities.
Okay. Since there's no global illumination in light, is there a suggested workaround to achieve this?
No, there is global. There is GI. There's just no physical.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so there is GI.
Let's see.
But that's not included in the light version. So GI would work with your full version. But if you take a look at if you have the full version, you have it. But it's not available, so you can see that I've put it on, but there are no settings for it. But if you actually have 13, 14, if you have a full version, you can actually jump in and use GHI.
Yeah. Okay. Do you know if the CC version has a built-in post-motion blur, or do you need a plug-in like Real Smart Motion Blur?
Yeah, I don't believe in CS6 has a thing. I don't believe there is a built-in one in CC. I haven't. It's not been shown to me. So I think you'd still be using like Real Smart.
Okay. Is Cineware compatible with like After Effects Ray Trace 3D renderer?
So Cineware itself is the renderer is using the Cinema 4D render. It's not using After Effects render, so it's its own render.
Okay.
One thing I want to mention as well for everybody out there is going to be upgrade. There's an upgrade special for anybody coming over from Creative Cloud into Broadcast or Studio, and I think the savings is somewhere around 30%. So if you're a Creative Cloud user and you're looking to jump on board into Cinema, then definitely at the start it's going to be a pretty nice deal to get you going, so you can take a look at the full versions where you'll have full dynamics, character tools, all the different render settings, things like that.
Okay.
And the folks over at Motion Media can help you as well.
When CC comes out, is it just going to be an update for Cinema 4D users, or do they even need to update anything on their Cinema 4D side of things?
That's the nice thing. So it's a new version of After Effects. So if you're already in the cloud and you get that update and you install it, you'll have access to the Cineware layer. So you can just start bringing in your Cinema 4D files and just drag them, import them, drag them right onto the timeline and start working.
Okay. Dave Glanz is saying Adobe CC does have pixel motion blur, by the way.
Woo! Yay!
And just so everybody knows,
that's what we'll recommend. Hi, Dave.
about when this is available.
I think I can stick around for probably another 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, I was going to say.
See how many I can run through.
There's a lot of questions about when it's going to be available and how, and if it works with CS6. And the answer is it's available in the new After Effects CC version, which is only available
June 17th, I think it is.
Cloud, yeah, which is coming out on June 17th. So it will not work with CS6 at this point, and I'm guessing ever. So
this is unless they it's a feature in the new CC. It's not a feature of the older one. It's kind of like when Adobe releases a new version, they don't update the features of an old one.
Yeah, exactly. And also, yes, this webinar will be recorded and posted so you can view it later. There's a lot of questions about that. Let's see. If I had some keyed footage, like say of a person, could I place that behind glass created in Cinema 4D?
Yeah, I mean there are definitely ways that you can to do that. Now you're going to want to work on reflections. That's when you get into lighting and reflections. But yeah, so you can just like I had the reflections bouncing off of those spheres inside of Cinema 4D. What you could do is actually take that footage, bring it into Cinema, adjust the angle of it so it's at the same angle that the person was walking, and then it would actually be picking up, or where the person's sitting, it would actually pick up the reflections of that video that you can use within your footage, because that would be applied to the piece of glass on Cinema, and then it would just act like any other Cinema 4D object with reflections.
Okay. I'm going to go back to one of the first questions asked here. And when rendering from within After Effects, with the imported C4D file, will AE give us a ballpark time on how long each frame of the 3D scene will take to render?
Ooh, That I don't know. I don't unless I've missed something as far as like when you go into your final render. I don't know if it tells you per frame, but I mean every time I render out in After Effects, it just gives me estimated time on final render. It doesn't give me a per frame. So that unless they've made an adjustment to their renderer when you're rendering, it's still the classic render output that I know of.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he was just saying that currently, it does that, but he was curious if it'll be able to know how long the C4D file inside of AE will take.
Yeah, that I am unsure. If you drag in like an individual file, I have not seen any settings that will tell me that.
Yeah. Okay. I think you went over this, but if you change the camera in After Effects, you don't need to re-export the camera to Cinema 4D, correct?
So right now, if you're inside of your Cineware layer, so if I jump into the layer I have solo here. So if I jump in there, you can see as far as my different camera options. So right now I'm using my Cinema 4D cam, but I could also use my centered comp camera, or I can jump in and do my comp cam. Let me start off with a fresh scene here. And just import this. So here, as I jump into my camera options, I can do my centered comp cam, and yeah, you can use After Effects cameras. Yeah, so you can use After Effects cameras. I just need to actually create one. So let's see. Yeah, you can. I haven't played with too many of the camera settings, but you can use an After Effects camera. So if you want to do your After Effects camera animation, the answer is yes. You can use an After Effects camera.
Okay, there's a few questions about Mocha Pro too. How does it work differently with Mocha Pro tracking data, or does the tracking data work as seamless as the AE tracking?
Yeah, so I haven't used Mocha Pro's tracking too much, but the beautiful thing about it is it will track, and especially the nice thing is it's robust enough to track things that you're not going to be able to track just using the standard camera tracker. And once you have that footage tracked, it will solve the 3D camera. So what's actually happening is you're having a 3D camera that's solved and animated within After Effects. So just like I added this camera in After Effects, if I did any animation to that, and I did a file export, Cinema 4D exporter, it will take that camera animation into my Cinema 4D comp. So as long as Mocha Pro is creating a 3D animated tracked camera inside of After Effects, same thing if you have any solids or planes that you've tracked in there and you set your ground plane, all of that will come over into Cinema 4D. So you would be able to use Mocha Pro as another alternative tracker because it's creating those things within After Effects.
Okay. Are morph cameras supported?
So in Cinema 4D, if you're going to any camera animation, if you're morphing between the cameras, I don't know if you'd need to actually bake that. Well, I haven't tried that. I do believe it's going to show up as one camera, though, just like we have the animated camera in the project. So if I select my camera here, and you'll see that I have my Cinema 4D camera, and I actually go to, let's see, select camera. if I select my camera and it's my animated camera, the camera that has the multiple morphs and keyed and animated, it would be, but I don't believe it's going to actually bring in those individual cameras unless you designate those individual cameras. But the animated camera, yeah, all that works.
Okay. I know there's still a lot of questions, and I'll try to get.
Yeah, for sure. But jump onto. I encourage everyone to jump onto Maxon's Twitter account. I know Josiah, my counterpart here, he's on there and constantly answering questions. So while it's fresh in your head, is a good time. Also, you can feel free, once again, I'm Major VFX on Twitter. You can tweet at me there or on Vimeo if there's questions and things you guys want to communicate too. But once again, I want to thank everybody at Motion Media as well as the Cinema 4D community to keep it going. I can't wait to see what everybody comes up with. And for the 20% of you who have not used Cinema before, definitely jump on. Now that everyone's going to have access to Cinema 4D Lite, at least, you're going to see the quality of work as well as the world of 3D opening up to more artists. So I definitely encourage you to jump on it as soon as possible and to get rolling.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you guys, Matthias and Maxon, of course. And, you know, if you guys need, you know, to watch this again, like I said, we're going to have it recorded. And also, we'll be sending out an email with some info on updating to the latest and greatest 4D software as well, so watch out for that.
Awesome.
And I think we're just going to cut it off here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks again, everyone.
And have a good day. Thanks.